Hey everyone, I am in Portugal. Welcome back to another recap of my chess tournament right here in Reguengos de Monsaraz. It's the sunset here, it's a beautiful evening, and I want to share with you this beautiful game. Now, this is the first time ever I played against an international master and a grandmaster in the same tournament, and it's the first time ever I play against each. So of course this game is not going to be very long because I played against an international master. He was very strong. And as always, we have a segment back at the hotel room with some lessons learned from this game, so stay tuned till the end to get your value out of this game. I have the white pieces against Utsab Chatterjee with the black pieces, who's 2300 FIDE. And so I start off with e4, my opponent goes with c5, and we hop in to the second Sicilian of mine in this tournament so far. Very interesting. I go with knight f3, d6, and then we go into d4 takes. So knight f6, knight c3, and then a6. Again, the Najdorf, the same move order. So this is getting familiar. Now I go with f3, and then my opponent goes with the traditional Najdorf, e5. The idea is to make space for this bishop and this bishop to both develop, as opposed to last game where e6 and this bishop saw virtually no action the entire game. e5, and I had prepared all night against what he plays here, and so I go with knight b3, my knight was attacked, development of the bishop, development of mine, development of theirs, and then I go queen d2. And here I had prepared thoroughly against two things, either for castles or for what he played once in like 2018, which is 6 years ago, and that is h5, a move that you play prior to castling to slow down the attack of the white pieces for the future. h5 has per idea to just block g4, and we saw that move in game 2, in which my opponent played h5 to prevent the g4 things, although now it's a Najdorf, and usually black castles on this. But here, that never happened. I go with castles myself. I had prepared against this. I played this very quickly. I prepped all night against h5, so I was happy that it was played out. My opponent goes with knight bd7, and here I go with king b1, which I had also prepared. We're still in theory. In this game, we played like 11 moves of theory. It's quite astounding. My opponent goes with rook c8, and this is the moment that I am brought out of theory. Rook c8 after 11 moves, and now I'm out of my knowledge because I had prepared against b5 here, which is the more, I think it's the more popular move. I later found out that this is just as popular, but b5 for a long time at least was very popular, and the follow-up with knight d5. I'm telling you this because on rook c8, I played knight d5 anyways. The only hiccup is that with the rook on c8 this time, when black take and I take back, bishop f5, which can happen in the other line, but this now attacks c2 rather interestingly. And I have really just two options here. I'm not going to play knight a1 and defend. I thought of bishop d3, which you can see in some games, and actually takes, and there's a pattern in the Sicilian to take back with the c-pawn. Aronian played this once and actually won with the white pieces after he traded one of the isolated pawns on e5, and it wasn't a doubled isolated pawn anymore. And there's also rook c1, which is what I play. And actually, I saw this in a Anand game in which he went rook c1 as a plan for the purpose of playing c4. c4 for c5 things. So rook c1, I said, okay, I'll bring my king away from the pin with king a1 so that the bishop doesn't laser in, and then I'll go for a typical like c4, c5, and that will be my plan in this game. Little did I know we would go out of theory very quickly. After b5, I played this knight a5 move, which is super typical in Najdorf structures, and then my opponent, I was thinking was gonna go for like knight f6 and just like attack this pawn. On knight f6, it's pretty wise. You're threatening to take, and if I take back, you have queen takes a5, and black is up a pawn here, so I don't want that. I would go for knight c6 first, queen here, still threatening to take on d5, and here I would not have enough time to play c4 because my pawn is pinned. If I could play c4, let's calculate together, takes, bishop takes, and on knight takes, I would just take back with the bishop and defend my knight right on time. But I don't have time for that, so I would have had to like just trade here, and it wouldn't have been that pretty for me. But my opponent stuns me and plays bishop, knight b6. And I'm like, okay, It's not what I expected, but this is a very normal move in Najdorf structures. The knight goes to b6 to threaten knight c5 or to pressure the pawn on d5. And usually what white does is that they just trade off the knight without thinking, especially if the knight is strong. Here the knight is not that strong, it's not really threatening d5, but in other lines it threatens d5. You have to take it off the board because otherwise you're losing a pawn in the center and your position kind of collapses. So I was about to take here when I realized that why take here now when I can just play the tempo gaining move, so gaining a time on the position by playing knight c6, instead of swifting the queen off of d8 and then playing knight c6, whereas I could have just played knight c6 first, attacking the queen moves, and then it loses a time, and then I can play something. Well, in this position, after queen c7, I rapidly take this knight, only to realize that my opponent's body language is completely off. Like, I don't know how to say it. He's like this, he's like slumped, and he swiftly looks at the other side of the board, he turns his head, and then I see it, and my heart drops, absolutely drops. And I go, in my head, I go, oh my God, I'm winning. I had no idea that I was winning until I took on b6, which is the really honest truth. You know, other creators will be like, yo, I did this, and you know, this is why. The reason why this is winning here is that if queen takes, the queen is now off of e7. This king is still not castled. And I can just bring the king, attract the king to a really bad square on e6. And after queen g5, you have no way of defending your bishop. And the white pieces gain a full piece. And for that reason, my opponent resigned in only 17 moves of play after bishop takes b6. This is the first time I played an international master, and I beat him in 17 moves. My first FM in Germany, I beat in 21 moves. This is insane, and I can't believe I'm living this with you. I get to share this passion of my life with you guys, and it makes me entirely grateful that you can come along for my adventure for these magnificent moments. And yes, I hid the eval bar from you, but the reality is, after bishop takes b6, it's plus 4.2. It's completely crushing. Today, I have 3 lessons learned from this very short 17-move game against an international master. This is what I learned from this game moving forward into my chess career. So number 1, when playing titled players, strong players, be very well prepared. Most of these players, they know 20 plus moves in their respective openings. So try to get them out of prep and try to make things unbalanced. In this game, I remember I played very quickly in the opening, and then I played something unexpected. After bishop f5, rook c1, I could clearly see he took his first long turn 6 minutes here because he didn't know what to play. On move 14, I stumped him with rook c1, which is a recycled idea in another variation that I played here, and he had to take his time to acclimate to this position. So that stomped him off his feet. Number 2 is tactics, 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 especially in the opening. Now, I said this piece of advice in the last video in game 2, but it's also very, very useful in this video because an opening tactic actually won me the game when you look at just the tactic that I had here. Knight c6 attacking the queen, and then the deflection bishop takes b6 of the queen off of the bishop on e7. The queen's overloaded, must take, and then we have an attraction tactic, knight takes e7, king takes, and then a nice fork with queen g5 check, winning the bishop at once. So tactics in the opening, in the endgame, in the middle game, all the time. Before every single move, you look for a tactic. And then finally is a psychological tip. Look once in a while at your opponent's body language. Sometimes, whether they're sitting right or sitting not right, you'll see if they're confident in the position or not. No, don't use this as a frame of reference to, manipulate yourself psychologically and judge how you play the game. But if you feel like you have an edge, or if you feel like you're crushing your opponent and they feel still confident, try to look at what they're looking at, because maybe they have something convincing. And if you're completely crushing, like here, I had a completely winning tactic after bishop takes b6, I could just see it. My opponent was just slouched and about to give up, and that's when I knew I've got something that's resignable here. My opponent was very as I was empathetic towards him. He signs the sheet, he runs out of the hall, and I understand it. I've had crushing moments in my earlier career. Why do you think I had a 4-year break of chess? I had crushing moments in my earlier part of my career where, you know, these moments happen, and it's part of chess, and that's one of the issues of chess being so objective. You're winning, or you're really losing, or sometimes it's a draw, but when you're losing, you're very losing, and that's the hard truth. And there's beauty in that, but you don't want to see the beauty when you have the short end of the stick. Tomorrow, I'm facing a 2400 international master.